So at this time, I'd like to welcome our second panel of business leaders to the stage for the Attracting Investment and Trade Facilitation panel. This panel will be led by a veteran of the Africa Business Forum, Francois Baird. Francois has been instrumental in strengthening the U.S.-Africa relationship in many capacities, including his leadership at Baird's U.S. and on the board of the Presidential Precinct. So without further ado, I will let Francois formally introduce himself and the rest of his panel. Thanks.
I brought an umbrella because I was taught the rain in Spain falls mainly on the plain, but you get soaked in Washington, D.C., so it's important to be covered. I'm particularly pleased to have a wonderful panel with me and a great topic, which I think is of interest to everyone. I'm going to let you guess which one is Adam Hemphill, but it's Suzie Zimmerman in the middle and Nyambuya right next to me. They're going to introduce themselves more fully because when I asked Jim earlier, what is the role of a moderator? He said, well, there's a reason why moderator and modest share a root. So let the spotlight fall on your panelists, not on yourself. What we're going to do is to try and create a conversation between the panel and then with you. So I will come in very rarely and hopefully won't have too much to do. So briefly, I'm the chairman, co-chairman of Baird CMC. We are a management consulting company, communications management consulting. We operate in 17 countries. We've done work in every single African country. We have 47 partners and 600 people in these countries. But my great joy and pleasure is to work with the Presidential Precinct and this terrific team that we have this year. And I really look forward to working with you on this topic. So let me first ask you to introduce yourselves. And if you don't mind, Adam, I'm going to start on this side. Ladies first. Ru?
Oh, okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Nyambuya, and I really am quite excited and honored to be here today. I'm not Maureen Harrington. I think the program says Maureen Harrington from Standard Bank. Unfortunately, she was not able to make it, but it was a yay for me because I've always wanted to engage with the Yali Fellows, but for some reason over the last couple of years, I haven't had a chance to come and meet you guys. So this is really, really exciting for me to be here today, to sit on this panel and to share some of, I guess, my experiences working on Africa with you guys. So my background, I am originally from Zimbabwe. I see there's two Zimbabweans in this program here today. Hi. I moved to the US maybe 15, 16 years ago for college. I currently work for Standard Bank in our client coverage office as part of the team that's working with US companies that we do business with in Africa. And I guess I'm hoping that a lot of people are familiar with Standard Bank, but for those who are not, we are headquartered in South Africa. We have presence in 20 other countries and operate in some countries as Stanbic Bank. So some people may not know Standard Bank. I actually didn't know that we were Standard, when I was in the US, I didn't know that Standard Bank was the same as Stanbic. So we are the same bank. And our role in the US for our team here is really to work with our clients that we do business with in Africa. We're not taking any risk in the US. All the risk we take is in Africa. I've been with the bank for 5 years. I joined out of business school at University of Chicago, and prior to that, I was at Ernst & Young here in New York for 5 years. So it's really an honor, and I'm excited to be on the panel today.
That's great, Ru. Susie.
Hi, everyone. My name is Suzie Zimmerman. I'm with UPS. I'm also very pleased to be speaking with you today. By way of introduction, I have been with UPS for about 2 years. I'm in their public affairs office working on international issues, specifically customs, trade facilitation, trade, all of the big topics of the day. It's very exciting. Before joining UPS, I was actually here at the Chamber working on the Middle East team. So it's always great to come back. And I grew up in Missouri, went to Indiana University. So that's just my basic background. For those of you who are not familiar with UPS, we are one of the largest global logistics companies. We have a presence in 220 countries and territories around the world, and we move 3% of global GDP through our network every day. So we truly have a global presence. In Africa, we have a presence in 51 countries of the 54. So we are wholly owned in Morocco, South Africa, and Nigeria, so we're not necessarily the brown trucks driving around your neighborhood, but we work closely with partners on the ground to provide our services in those markets. I'll leave it there and continue when we talk through other questions.
Thanks, Susie. Adam.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Adam Hemphill. Pour ceux qui parlent français, je vous dis bonjour. I studied French as an undergrad, and my goodness, I'm going to use it wherever I can. I've been with Walmart, Massmart, for about just over 10 years now. And so just by way of introduction to Walmart, I think I'll focus initially. Everyone's familiar with Walmart. It's one of the largest retailers in the world. But in 2011, Walmart acquired a majority stake in Massmart, which is the second largest retailer in Africa. Massmart has a presence in about 13 countries in sub-Saharan Africa, principally South Africa, 412 stores, of which about 40 are outside of Africa, or outside of South Africa. Our mission as a company, which really does match the Massmart mission, is to save people money so that they can live better. And principally to our investment in Africa, central to that investment is strong formats that really are designed to expand opportunity for the middle class. And so we think we have a great value proposition for the continent. And currently about 48,000 employees ranging in fields from entry level all the way up to management. So looking forward to talking to you today about the opportunities for trade and investment.
What a great panel, don't you agree? Thank you. I look forward to this discussion. And when we had our meeting to talk, we agreed that we're going to try and make the link between our topic and development, because most of you are interested in that link. I'm African-born, but American-made. So from Africa, I learned the importance of development. And in the US, I learned the importance for development of wealth creation. And so I hope we can make that link and create a great discussion amongst each other. And I'm going to lead off with a question to you, Adam. So from a Walmart perspective, what's the value of trade and investment in terms of imports, local procurement, infrastructure development, and communities? Because you operate in communities, don't you?
Sure. I mean, and that's absolutely true. Retailing is local, and we're reminded that every day as we're talking about broader business decisions that enable the business. Our executives constantly remind us to go back to the local level and understand, are we serving the customer in the way that we need to? As I thought about these questions, I wondered where to begin. We're at the very end of the supply chain. We're right before, so there's a lot happening up to that point, and so a lot of opportunities for trade and investment and the benefits. I think maybe I'll start at the very end. When you talk about the customer, what we're looking for is opportunity to serve them and to stimulate growth. There's nothing more than you can do for a family than to lower the cost of their basic needs so that they can take their money and use it in other areas in investment. We've heard that whether it's here in Illinois where I'm from, or whether it's in Africa. If you can lower the price of food, lower the price of a dishwasher, this is a great contribution. But in a lot of areas, there can be a pretty significant informal sector for retail, and then there can be the formal sector, and there's great value to both. And I think for Walmart, as a formalizing role, is really incredible. It contributes to sort of the state development. You can create a certain bit of certainty for the customer, create certain wages, provide taxes and fees, and build out distribution centers that really benefit all across the board. It's a great, with the endpoint as you go back to the customer and you're thinking about suppliers, it's a great formalizing role for them, giving them training to build out their supplies for a global scale. So us as a retailer, we have a strong brand proposition, and for us, what's important is to build out high compliance standards. And so by working with suppliers large and small, we're able to build out these standards and help them learn how do you sell a product at a local level, then build up scale, and then build it out to a larger level. Employees, another opportunity. We think that retail is a great entry-level role that can be built out and training into management. We've seen this here in the United States, focusing on training academies. We think that the skills that you build out at a retail level are really important and can be the starting point for other jobs. And so we've been looking at how do we recognize that through a certification, through training, et cetera. I just think there's a lot of opportunity that retail plays, and I'm anxious to continue the conversation.
Adam, you mentioned certainty, and I think when it comes to certainty in trade, nothing is more important than logistics. And Susie, you're the expert on the logistics side, and it's a particularly difficult problem in Africa. And yet it is mission critical for development. Without logistics, no development can take place. So I'm very interested in what do you think from your perspective must be done to improve particularly intra-African trade, not only trade from Africa and with Africa from elsewhere, but intra-African trade, as well as international trade, logistics, and infrastructure. And what will be the development benefits if we get those things right?
Sure. So I'll start broad and kind of work my way down to the answer to your question. But as I mentioned, we're a global company, and we see a real strategic opportunity in Africa because of the young and large population there, the emerging middle class, growing middle class. And of course, with the growth in the middle class, you get the greater demand for healthcare products, IT products, consumer electronics, consumer goods, machinery parts, automotive parts. So we go where our customers want to operate. And so for us, we are building a presence in Africa. But in order to help our customers to reach their consumers, we have a reputation that's built around guaranteed delivery and in-time delivery. And it's challenging to do that when there are obstacles at the border that are delaying shipments, that are driving up costs. So for us, globally, trade facilitation is mission critical. We cannot do our jobs and serve our customers without it. So, so in Africa, one of the major solutions that we see that's ready-made, that's kind of easy to grab onto is the World Trade Organization's Trade Facilitation Agreement. This is an agreement, if you're not familiar with it, that directs the 164 members of the WTO to raise their customs processing standards, modernize their mechanisms, build the regulatory environment that's going to facilitate cross-border trade. We are in the midst of implementation of this agreement. It went into force in February. And I won't get into the weedsy details unless you'd like to hear more later. You can ask about it, but customs is not necessarily the sexiest of topics. But broadly, the main message is, I'm going to repeat what Mr. Murray said earlier today, that we kind of want to implant some ideas and not provide solutions, but I'm sorry, not give direction, but sort of spark some ideas in your minds. But when you go home and you look at all the products that are in your house and the products you like to use, and you think, where did they come from? And what would it mean for barriers at the border to be dropped, or for the speed, the time in transit to speed up? What would that do to your local community and the commerce there? And then what would that do for the local entrepreneur who wants to sell their product across the border to a neighboring country? What does that mean for small businesses in general across the continent to reach the global marketplace? One illustrative example is the World Bank's Logistics Performance Index, which looks at infrastructure, cross-border processes, regulations. Of the top 50 countries, there's only one African country, and I'm being frank here. So, in the bottom 50 countries, I believe there's 20 African countries. So it's definitely an area that we are focused on to improve the network across the continent for both our customers and emerging businesses, the micro business that wants to build into something bigger and reach foreign consumers. It's a major opportunity that we see to really integrate Africa into the global value chain.
Thank you. And now the big word that starts with an M, money. Ruth, when you talk to us about, from your perspective, what do you think are the changes that you would like to see happening to improve investment and trade facilitation and banking in Africa?
That's, I think every conversation that, when you work for a bank and you're talking about investing, a lot of the times, every conversation always starts with access to finance is the key unlock to all of this. And then as a banker, you're like, oh my God, it's such a tall order. And as a bank, I think, for Standard Bank, it's something that we take seriously. And we do want to get to a yes when we talk of, when you're sitting in that credit committee and you take your deal, you want to get to a yes. But then there's broader things that sometimes pose as challenges for us to get to that yes. And so I think before we get into that, maybe I'll just contextualize the role that we're playing in this, right, to try to get to development. So there's two things. From a banking perspective, and we could do so many things, but I'll focus on two. One is the trade finance aspect of it, which is the LCs that, when someone is shipping, a product is being shipped either from Africa to the US or vice versa, we're providing trade finance facilities to facilitate those trades. And then the other aspect of it, where finance comes in, is on the bigger projects. So you talk of promoting trade and investment for development. A key part of that is having the right infrastructure in place for guys like UPS to be able to transport the goods to and from one place. So we're talking, rail, roads, and ports, and having that infrastructure in place that allows that to happen. In addition to that, another key component would be power. So we want power to irrigate, so for your irrigation equipment to actually work, or if it's a manufacturing facility in Africa to work. And so the financing for those things to work, for us to be able to do those things, I think broadly some of the challenges that we face, which come together with some of the partners that we then work with, I think one of the biggest thing is we need to continue to encourage existence of a reliable and consistent regulatory and policy environment in our African countries. We have, most of the time, like right now, elections are happening in Kenya, things are at a halt. No one is making a decision because we don't know what the policy environment will look like post the elections. But I think if we had some consistency, and policies will always change, but I think being able to rely on a regulatory framework and environment as a financier is something that is quite important. And so if we can encourage that to happen in our African countries, that's one thing that would certainly help to unlock and even give investor confidence to also come, because there's banks, but there's also other financial institutions that can bring in, or investors that can bring in money into the continent. The other aspect would be, for us, that would be helpful is, or that we need to continue to encourage is, one of the big challenges getting to a credit-worthy borrower, and that could mean so many things. On the bigger projects, so your bigger project financing deals, one of the things, and even some of the smaller ones, something that's been helpful to us is having partners like the DFIs, the ECAs, the multilaterals that will come in and provide guarantees to the banks. So having those guys as partners has been helpful in doing some of the deals that we've done on the continent. And I'll give an example close to my heart, Zimbabwe. Doing a project finance deal in Zimbabwe would be a bit more challenging from a political standpoint, because at the end of the day, you have to rely on the government. And the truth is, it's harder to come to a yes on a credit decision in the environment that we operate in Zim. But Zim needs power. The people of Zimbabwe need power. So as Standard Bank, we just closed earlier this year, we closed a deal where we worked with the Namibian government. we worked with ZESA and ZPC, which is Zimbabwe Power Company, and we financed for the rehabilitation of Wange Power Station and Kariba so that they could produce more power. Part of that power was then sold to Namibia, and for us as financiers, we're taking credit risk on Namibia, which, frankly speaking, is a better credit from a commercial banking perspective. And we also had the support of PTA Bank as a partner coming into the transaction, which is quite critical as well. And then we also had some guarantees from from EKN, I believe. So I think the collaboration and working with the DFIs and multilaterals is quite important. The regional integration, looking at Zimbabwe and Namibia and coming up with a solution, which also brings the point of sometimes we then take a step back and saying, oh, you can't do a deal in Zimbabwe, but let's be innovative. Let's work together and think outside the box and come up with solutions that can help to facilitate some of these trades and the investment that we need on the continent. And then the last thing that I would add would be just, I guess, encouraging our private sector partners to take a long-term view on our continent. I think if we go in saying, I want returns, and I work for a bank that has shareholders that are looking for a return, but we also need to help the broader community understand that we need to take a long-term view in Africa. We can't go in with expecting a return. Sometimes it's possible, but you really need to put your boots on the ground and have that long-term view and patience to help facilitate and unlock the environment for the investment to come in. That was a lot.
Great points. And something I've noticed among all the points you've made comes to certainty. It comes to, we want to know what's ahead. We want to understand what's ahead. How do you think the three of you, if you had your way and you could work together, how would you go about creating more certainty? Or how could the fellows help you to create more certainty?
It seems as though certainty comes in a greater degree of transparency in the process. So if you have more visibility to the supply chain and the choke points along the way and what the obstacles are that we need to work on and where we can partner with international institutions and financial institutions to address these issues and working with local governments. Certainty is definitely a driver of growth because especially those who are not, who are maybe new to business or trying to grow a business, and trying to navigate all the complexities of international commerce. It's tough, and the more access you have to information and to have your questions answered and to have willing partners in the government and services providers and suppliers, I think it's one ecosystem of facilitating that development. So I think transparency is key.
I think as we start to talk about some of the challenges, I wanted to hit home the opportunity, because I think that we can get bogged down with what makes things hard. I just came out of 2 days of meetings where we were talking about supply chains between the U.S. and Canada, and it was a laundry list of challenges of how do you get product from one place to the other. So this is always a continuing, evolving conversation. When you look at Africa as a continent, and I know that's a broad stroke, but you see real opportunity. Right now, wholesale and retail is contributing to about 22% of growth of GDP. But over the next few years, between now and 2020, I think you're going to see about 45 million more customers or people entering the consuming class, and then you're going to see consumer retail purchasing up to $1 trillion by 2020 as well. So real opportunity. For us, what's important is to get the customer what they want, when they want, where they want it. And so you might not have realized it, but you actually have 2 logistics companies on the panel. So I think that when we're looking to drive certainty, logistics is fundamental. And what I haven't even talked about right now, I've been focusing on stores within the continent, but really as Walmart as a sourcing opportunity, we have 400 stores in Africa, we have about 1 million stores around the world. And so they're looking to source product, and they also need what they want, when they want, where they want it. And if there's a situation where we have a store manager that has a shelf and he's told that his product will come, it should be coming soon between 5 and 18 days. that's a missed sale, that's a missed opportunity. If they've worked really hard, we had an example in the UK where they'd built a lot of produce, built demand for a special type of stone fruit out of Africa. They'd built up the demand, the customer started to like it, it was really catching on, but then because of problems in the logistics supply chain, they ended up with an empty shelf, and they just can't have that in the tight retail market that they have at Asda. And so there are real opportunities. I think if you want to build transparency, if you want to build certainty and transparency, the best place to start is with logistics. And it might not seem that is, fickle, but I just read an article the other day about agriculture producers being worried about the their supply chains going into Canada as the result of NAFTA negotiations that haven't even started yet. And so that uncertainty really causes concern, and businesses will look for other opportunities to make sure that they're going to be whole at the end of the day. I think starting with clear logistics, speedy logistics, sorry to go on and on, but when you're thinking about a supplier that's manufacturing out of Africa, supply chains are fundamentally complicated. If you have a shirt, it's not just going to be fabric, it's going to be yarn, it's going to be any accoutrements that are on the shirt, the buttons, and those products might not all be in one place. So having a supply chain, we're going to have a sourcing manager. They're not going to look under a rock to try to put it all together. They need to know that a product, that the inputs can get to the product quickly, and they can have an affordable product that can get out quickly as well. So start with logistics and supply chain, and then you've got room to grow.
And I guess the only other thing I would add is let's work to build institutions that our business partners can rely on. So if UPS is working with Walmart because Walmart is shipping something into Africa, let's have an institution, let's be clear on what the process is to ship something from one point to another. If we're paying taxes at the port, let's be clear on what those types of taxes are. So let's work together to build institutions that have clear policy and frameworks for our partners to then be able to rely on those, because that if I do this is the outcome.
Fantastic. Now let's broaden the conversation. It's your chance to enter the conversation. Who would like to start? I see a hand over there. So let's say it's 1, 2, 3, and 4. Very good. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, both for the panelists and the moderator. My question will be directed to the two of the panelists, Ru and Adam. So Ru, you talked about creditworthiness, that you look into creditworthiness whenever you sit on a table trying to decide for whom to give money. For me, I work for Care International. I am coming from Ethiopia, and I work for Care Ethiopia. And I work with rural poor women, and access to finance is challenging. So you want those women to diversify their means of livelihood, but they don't have money. So one major problem is that banks wouldn't consider women, rural women, as creditworthy. So what does it take for banks to start to believe in women's creditworthiness? How can we prove that to banks, and how can we work with them? My question for Adam is, when are you coming to Ethiopia?
Very good. Well, you start the answer.
I really personally believe that. I really like Walmart. You will find us, most of us, in Walmart. All of the things that we bought already are from Walmart. I believe that you're doing your share. You're helping the development. You're in the development sector as well, even if you're business, especially because you provide products in a lesser price for the poor. I believe that's a good thing. But my question is, in relation to small and medium scale enterprises in the value chain, do you also buy from them? Thank you.
Thank you. Ru, why don't you go first, and then Adam.
Okay. So on the helping to, I guess, increase creditworthiness of women in the eyes of a commercial bank, I guess what I would say is, I know that as Standard Bank, we have two arms, a corporate and investment banking arm, and then we have a personal and business banking arm. So when it comes to the financing of individuals, that will be in our personal and business banking arm. And we do have, we have some programs that are there to help finance SMEs and specifically focusing on women entrepreneurs. But I think the bigger part of what we can actually continue to do more in some countries, because I know we do it in some, is having programs to help educate our women entrepreneurs so that they can actually develop businesses that are sustainable. And it's not undermining what they're currently doing, but I think we can all learn, to Paul's point earlier, looking at continuing to personal growth and development, right? So I think one big that we as a bank could do more is empowering those women by providing them with the tools to grow their businesses so that we can look at it from that perspective. And I think then part of it is there's the commercial way of looking at things, and then there's and you don't really separate them, but then there's also the development way of it, which we as a bank, we do have that arm, and we do support some women businesses as well. I don't know if that helps.
It does. Adam.
So appreciate your support. I would answer your first question. Walmart's always looking for opportunities, and we've been around in international since about 1990, and so we've had some great successes, but then also some missteps. So when we think about moving into different markets, we want to make sure we do it right, and we do it in the right way. And what's challenging for us is two things. One, we're a discount retailer, and it's a very competitive place, so we have to make sure that the value proposition we're offering to a certain market is there. And second of all, since we're at the end of supply chain, as I mentioned before, a lot of the other things have to align as well. And so they're being very careful as they look at growth, but do want to go where there's opportunities. And I think that, just from my remarks earlier, there's just real opportunity across the continent. It might be a long game, but it's really encouraging. You asked about small and medium-sized enterprises, and of course, we're looking at that. We find that across the board, especially with our customer, they want the product at a low cost. And so what we like to do is partner and figure out what are the ways that we can deliver that product to them. They also want to buy local whenever they can. And so how can we deliver that to the customer at a low cost? And so there's a lot of ways that we can do that. One is we can go all the way back to the beginning of the supply chain, create sort of certainty on our end, because our suppliers need the same certainty that we need. And so if we tell them, we promise to buy this product for this period of time, at what price could you give it to us? And having that certainty that they can make the investments that they need to lower the cost can just be a win-win situation. We also are really trying to have a diverse base so that we have a broad assortment so that the customer wants to come in and sees the options that they have. I thought you might ask the question about small and medium-sized enterprises. So I'm going to tell you, if you go, I just recently was in Africa and did a tour of all the stores, and I would encourage you, here I am with my iPad, if you ever go into the store, they'll be pleased to show you a cooler that they worked with a small supplier to build out, got it at a low cost. A lot of people love camping, believe it or not, and so they were able to build out this cooler, and then now they're even exporting this organization. Another one is charcoal briquettes that are now going across. So it's like, we sell everything, but large and small, and there's lots of opportunity that's out there. We just have to make sure that we can partner in the right way to get the financing right, to get the certainty right, so that we can continue to scale and grow.
Next time, Adam, I want to see a picture of South African wine.
I just wanted to quickly tack on a comment to what Rue was saying. So you were talking about the support system for women entrepreneurs, but just to sort of expand on that a little bit, Ambassador Sanders was saying earlier that if you have access to the internet, you have access to a market, but really you have to consider just as part of that the whole environment that's going to enable sales to that market. So you have the internet access, it's great, but then do you have secure payment platforms? Do you have the logistics to deliver, from your factory to the doorstep? All of those different components that need to come into play. So I just wanted to build on that to say the whole environment needs to be conducive to supporting these small businesses. And I think when you all go home to your home countries and you take a look at these enabling environments with an eye towards what could be improved to support your communities and encourage your neighbors to what are the environmental capabilities that are going to encourage the members of your community to think on an international commerce scale?
We have 7 minutes for the next 3 questions to be both asked and answered, so 2.
What considerations would you advise African states when they negotiate trade deals? That is, what should they take into account to get profitable trade deals for the continent?
Very good question. Who wants to kick off?
I'll just start by saying I think one of the critical ingredients to a successful trade negotiation is input by all stakeholders. If you leave business out of the dialogue, if you leave civil society, if you don't have all the players at the table, you're not getting every perspective, and you're not hearing the concerns of the folks who work on these trade lanes day to day, within these trade lanes day to day. It's a critical ingredient, I believe.
I guess I would say I'm not a negotiator, but I'm a user. And so it's a little bit complicated for me. I agree with that. You've got to do a scoping exercise across the board and maybe identify sort of the key areas where you're positioned and staged for growth, and make sure that you're focusing on how do you enable those. But then also encourage you to think about what goes into enabling those, because there might actually be some partnership between the country and then whoever the trading partner is to sort of enable that growth together.
I guess the last thing I would add would then also be just around the partners, the due diligence that we do in selecting and getting comfortable with partners that we bring to the table in the negotiation.
Thank you. 3 is over here, if I'm not mistaken. No. Did you hand over to?
Yeah, I want to hand my question to.
I already asked a question. If somebody else have a question.
Oh, I see. Hand over. 3.
Yes, thank you very much. My name is Emmanuel from Ghana. My question goes to Standard Bank. We've talked about access to credit, but I want to concentrate on interest rates. I know in Ghana we have a policy rate of 18% and a base rate of 24.5%. Now, the average bank in Ghana, including Stanbic Bank, charges 40% on loans. This has made most small and medium businesses defaulted the loans that they collected, and before giving them the loan, properties were given as collateral. Then these properties are confiscated. This has therefore made small and medium businesses in Ghana reluctant even accessing loans because of the higher interest rate. I know every year the Minister for Finance and Economic Planning meets all the banking institutions and the heads of institutions, including your banking, Alassa and Dani, and they discuss about interest rate. Why is it that the bank charges too much interest rate?
That's okay, so I guess in answering that, I'm not very close to Ghana specifically and how things are working, but in general, what I would say is that part of the challenge, so we are a financial institution that needs to provide a return to shareholders. And I'm not saying this is why we do business, but that is one consideration that comes into play, right? So, and we have a cost of funds as a bank that before we do anything else, we need to, we have a cost of funds for the money that we have to then lend out. I think the way it works, and I'm not very close to this, so I may need to refer you to my colleagues to be very honest, but we also have challenges around transfer pricing because we're a South African bank and operating in Ghana, so that also adds a layer of cost. So eventually when we get to the margin that we get as a bank, it's I don't want to say that, and I'm not close to Ghana, so I don't know what the margin that the bank actually gets at the end of the day is, But I think those are some of the considerations that come into play for us as a South African bank. So we're also borrowing, and depending on whether we're lending US dollars or local currency, that also impacts the rate that we then eventually charge you guys. But I'll be happy to connect you with my colleagues in Ghana if you want to understand better how that all works.
There's a great offer. We have chance, 1 minute for one question and one answer. Go ahead.
I'm wondering what your experience has been in working with countries that have really stringent foreign exchange policy. For example, in Nigeria, an ordinary person can't buy something in foreign currency for more than $100, in a month. So what has your experience been, and how has that impacted doing business with countries like ours?
Who would like to lead off? Drew, would you like to lead off? Adam?
I could lead off because I don't have much to say. As we're growing across Africa, we have a very small presence in different markets. So I think I mentioned these 13 different markets, maybe 1 or 2 stores. And I think that we're taking it very carefully and making sure that we can be successful in what we're doing. And so any sort of barrier or restriction, we're going to be monitoring to see what the impact is. And what we try to do, and part of what my role is too, is to understand what the impact is and then maybe communicate that back to policymakers so that they have an understanding a bit better of where that goes right down to the person just shopping. And so hopefully we can draw that link, and then we can lead to positive policy change for everyone.
And then I guess from our perspective, we do deal with a lot of clients who have invested, say, for example, in a country like Nigeria. And maybe to take a step back, I think there's 2 parts. One is a situation where there's liquidity of hard currency is actually limited in certain countries, and then that creates exchange control regulation that is stringent. And then there's also some other countries who, some foreign investors, they may think that some countries have tight exchange control to protect the local market. So maybe I'll focus on the liquidity constraints for hard currency, then resulting in what would be termed tough exchange control. So we do work with a lot of clients who, for example, have invested money in Nigeria, and then as an investor, you need to repatriate some of that, and it becomes challenging. For us as a bank, we've definitely seen the level of business go down, so we can't actually lend US dollar in a country like Nigeria at the moment. We'll primarily focus on local currency. In helping our clients with repatriations, there's a process in Nigeria that you have to follow, and I think right now in Nigeria, the central bank controls the level of liquidity that banks have to give to their clients. And the clients themselves, and also they've put in regulation where, depending on your sector, depends on how much foreign currency you can actually get. So as a bank, usually our hands are tied. We're just following what the regulation is to try and support our clients. The best we can do is help our clients understand what the regulation is. So we stay close to the central banks to understand what the regulation is. So that when you are putting in money, you need to be very clear what the steps to put in money are, and under what conditions you can repatriate that money before you even make the money. So I think that's the advice that I would give, and it's not just Nigeria, I think it's in any country, that if you're thinking of investing and transferring money into another country, before doing that, just be clear on what the process would be to try and then repatriate that money at some point in time, which also may change over time, but at least before going in, be clear on that.
Very good. So last question, 30 seconds each. If you were sitting there and you want to make your fortune, what would you do? And secondly, tell us something we don't know that's interesting. Adam.
I kind of led into it before. I think that, the key to success, if I was super successful, I'd be on a beach somewhere and you wouldn't even be hearing from me. But the key to success is identifying a need and satisfying that need, and then there's opportunity for growth. So I was going to start by saying logistics. That's just really an area that once that grows and develops. But quite honestly, the best thing is to invest in anything. and then push for logistics, because I think that'll just, everything is going to do better when you have that opportunity for building connectivity and transparency. Something that's surprising about my industry is, when I started, I was really nervous one day, and one of my colleagues said, "Sweetheart, I don't know why you're so nervous. We're just trying to sell stuff." And I laugh at that because it's so simple, and the value proposition that we're offering, save money, live better, is simple. But what's really interesting about retail when you unpack it is that it's, especially as we're moving into e-commerce, the jobs that are in that sector are really wide-ranging. I mean, we're not just talking about selling stuff on the shelf, which is good managerial training, but also logistics and supply chain, commodity identification, looking at currencies and exchange rates, and the whole works. E-commerce and marketplaces is growing like crazy. It's just a diverse field.
Susie.
So this countdown is driving me nuts. So just building on the logistics piece, I think a really interesting opportunity is, I was talking to my colleague about this the other day, agribusiness, which is a little surprising, but apparently, I didn't know this, the food that is lost from spoiled harvests across Africa could feed something like 49 million individuals around the world, and it could have a huge impact on hunger crises. So the logistics of agribusiness, so cold storage, rapid logistics to move those harvests to market before they spoil, I think that would be an interesting opportunity. I really quickly wanted to put in a plug something that is fascinating, that I think is fascinating, that UPS is doing in Africa. About a year ago, we teamed up with two companies, Gavi, which is a Swiss-based vaccine organization, and Zipline, which is a California-based technology company. We teamed up with them to launch a drone project in Rwanda, working with the Rwandan government. Apparently, Rwanda has the highest rate of maternal deaths. And so this project aims to send blood transfusions by drone to remote villages in 30 minutes or less, where the roads might be impassable or the terrain is just would take too much time to get these emergency supplies. So it's a fascinating project. I think it really speaks to the power of public-private partnership and some of the really interesting things that you can do to solve a basic issue that should really not be an issue. And sort of the magic behind that.
Incredible. Ru, last word, top that.
Wow. That's going to be tough. I was actually going to say one of the surprising things that I just learned was about drones transporting medical supplies into Africa. That was, for me, that was surprising. I did not know that. And then on the fortune, my answer is a bit cheesy and corny, but I would say talent, investing in talent. I think investing in people on the continent who are going to be the business leaders of the future, like you guys, and giving that exposure to people for young Africans to have that basic education of learning the math, but then also go and sit in London somewhere and see how the world works, or have Africans working in the global world. I think, so investing in people, investing in talent, and when you empower somebody, I think you empower yourself, and hopefully there's some return, financial return in that as well.
How great was this? Thank you. You're all wonderful. Thank you very much.